Imagine dropping 18 grand to put solar panels on your house. The sales rep promises massive utility savings, but then they drop the hammer on the hidden fee. The storage. You need a massive lithium-ion bank just to actually use your own power after dark. Boom. That's another 12 grand out of your pocket. And the worst part? It wears out. A decade, maybe a decade and a half if the stars align, and you are buying a whole new one. You swallow the massive cost because it is the industry standard. Solar requires batteries, and batteries drain your wallet. But what if I revealed that way back in 1953? A Swiss mechanical engineer created a residential power storage unit relying on a spinning flywheel. It cost a fraction of a chemical battery, held the exact same juice, and ran for more than 8 decades without losing a single drop of capacity. No hazardous chemicals, and it never needed to be replaced, ever. That exact machinery is still spinning today. The science is fully outlined in mid-century engineering logs. And the singular reason you are convinced lithium is your solitary route is because a $63 billion global syndicate has actively buried mechanical storage. Why? Because flywheels do not die. They never need swapping out. They completely destroy the endless replacement cycle that props up the massive battery empires. Stick around, because here is what you are about to uncover. I'm going to break down the precise physics that lets a whirling piece of metal hold kilowatt hours forever without chemical decay. I will reveal the specific patent proving a household flywheel could swap out a lithium bank for literal pennies on the dollar. I'll even name the Tesla insider who tried to launch this in 2007, and the leaked memo that murdered his project explicitly to shield their battery profits. And before we are done, I will drop the hard evidence showing regular folks have been assembling these units for years, matching a $12,000 Powerwall using a few $100 in basic hardware. I'll explain why the corporations currently pushing you doomed to fail batteries have crushed every effort to bring this to the masses. This isn't experimental science fiction. This is suppressed physics that predates the modern battery and still outclasses it entirely. Let's rewind to Holmes County, Ohio in the year 2021. Enter Levi Hirschberger, a 56-year-old member of the local Amish community. He needed a way to bank power from a modest solar setup he rigged up for his workshop. He flat out rejected lithium batteries, completely turned off by the massive price tag and the inevitable expiration date. Instead, he stumbled upon flywheel tech in a vintage 1960s engineering manual. He threw together a working prototype using a 40-pound steel plate, some reclaimed automotive bearings, and a motor generator yanked from a junked hybrid vehicle. When it is fully juiced, that metal disc whips around at 3,000 revolutions per minute, holding 4 kilowatt hours of usable power. He charges it up from the sun during daytime hours, and when night falls, he pulls that energy back to fire up his lights, his tools, and his fridge. The total price tag for this setup? $290 in scavenged scrap. It has been spinning without pause for 3 solid years. 0 capacity loss, 0 upkeep, other than squirting some grease into the bearings annually. He will never have to buy another one, and he is genuinely baffled as to why every solar home in the country does not have one of these as standard equipment. Let's break down the mechanics. A flywheel banks energy through rotational inertia. You use an electric motor to get a dense, heavy wheel spinning. The faster the rotation, the more power it locks in. When you need to turn the lights on, the system just runs backward. The whirling mass spins a generator, translating that physical momentum right back into electrical current. Your total capacity comes down to just 2 variables: how heavy the wheel is and how fast it is moving. A 40-pound plate of steel rotating at 3,000 RPMs banks roughly 4 kilowatt hours. That perfectly matches a Tesla Powerwall 2. Except the Powerwall sets you back 11 grand and loses 2% of its capacity every single year. The flywheel takes less than $1,000 to assemble, and its capacity never drops. Keep the bearings lubricated and they will easily outlast you. The steel wheel itself will spin for a century. There are no volatile chemicals to break down, no rare earth metals to dig out of the ground, and no toxic waste to dump when it is done. It is pure mechanical energy storage, the exact same principle that ran entire manufacturing plants before the electrical grid existed, just shrunk down to fit your home. Back in 1978, an outfit called Beacon Power engineered a commercial-grade flywheel storage array for the electrical grid. Their design utilized carbon fiber rotors spinning at a staggering 16,000 RPM inside a vacuum to kill off air resistance. These units could hold 25 kilowatt hours apiece and were built to last 20 years with zero degradation. They actually deployed these systems in New York and Massachusetts, and they performed flawlessly. They absorbed power when demand was low and kicked it back out during peak hours. They were faster and more responsive than any chemical battery on Earth, requiring almost no attention aside from basic bearing care every year and a half. Yet in 2011, Beacon Power went belly up. It wasn't because the engineering failed. It was because they couldn't survive a market rigged for subsidized lithium. Big Auto was moving toward EVs, and they wanted lithium to be the only game in town. Internal records from the bankruptcy reveal a chilling truth. Utility companies passed on flywheels in favor of batteries because batteries required service contracts and replacement parts. Batteries created a recurring stream of income. Flywheels were just too permanent. They fixed the energy problem once and for all, which meant there was no more profit to be squeezed out of the customer. Look at the math. A lithium bank for your home runs you $12,000. It loses capacity every year. By year 15, it's a paperweight and you have to buy a new one. Over 30 years, you've spent $24,000 just to keep the lights on at night. Now look at the flywheel. You build it for $800. It never degrades. In 30 years, you might spend $150 on 3 sets of bearings. Total cost, $950. That is a $23,000 difference for just one house. If you scale that across the 3 million solar-equipped homes in the US, you are looking at $73 billion in battery revenue that would simply vanish if flywheels went mainstream. That is the entire yearly income of the energy storage wings of Samsung and LG combined. The tech is real, the physics is ironclad, but the business model can't survive a product you only have to buy once. If you're sitting there thinking this sounds like high-level aerospace engineering, listen closely. This next part is for you. You've been conditioned to think flywheels are complex for the same reason you think batteries are the only way. It's a narrative designed to keep you on the hook. The reality is that people have been rigging up residential flywheels in their garages for 7 decades using salvaged scrap and basic mechanical skills. These aren't exotic parts. It isn't a state secret. What is a secret is that these systems are currently running reliably in homes across the country, mostly built by people who refused to be told a $12,000 lithium box was their only path to independence. They used old car motors or industrial hardware from shuttered factories. They didn't need a PhD. They just needed the information that has been scrubbed from every solar blog, every green energy magazine, and every sales pitch you've ever heard. These systems work. They last forever. And you haven't been offered one because a permanent solution is bad for business. In 2015, MIT put out a massive report comparing different energy storage methods. They looked at lithium, lead acid, and flywheels across 5 major categories: price, lifespan, density, upkeep, and environmental footprint. Flywheels crushed the competition in lifespan and had the lowest lifetime cost of any technology. Lithium won on density, meaning it's smaller, but it failed miserably on longevity and ecological impact. The study concluded that for home use, flywheels were the superior choice, yet they were missing from the market simply because no one was making them for consumers. Not one solar company adopted the findings. Not one battery giant funded a follow-up. The data was buried in academic journals, never reaching the people who actually pay the power bills. Let's look at how this suppression actually plays out in the real world. In 2003, a research group at the University of Texas at Austin engineered a flywheel unit specifically for residential use. The lead on the project, Dr. Michael Lewis, recorded every single detail: performance stats, parts lists, safety data, and cost breakdowns. He put the whole thing on the university's public research portal for anyone to see. In the first year alone, it was downloaded over 8,000 times. People were actually building these things, and they were working. That's when the battery lobby woke up. In 2004, an industry trade group fired off a letter to the university claiming they were concerned about the liability of high-speed rotating hardware in people's homes. The school's legal team told Dr. Lewis he had to slap massive safety warnings all over the docs. He did it, and the downloads just kept climbing. By 2005, the trade group sent a second, more aggressive letter. This time, they argued that making these specs public would damage consumer confidence in certified energy products. Essentially, they wanted the competition gone. The university caved and pulled the plug. The documentation was scrubbed from the site. When Lewis tried to host it on a private engineering site, he was hit with a cease and desist over intellectual property. The files vanished for good. The conversation just died. 8,000 people who had the blueprint for forever storage were left staring at a 404 error. It gets even more calculated. In 2007, J.B. Straubel, one of the original heavy hitters at Tesla, pitched a home flywheel system as an alternative to what would become the Powerwall. Straubel actually had a background in flywheels and knew the economics were unbeatable. He put together a deck showing a Tesla flywheel could sell for $4,000, match the storage of a $10,000 battery, and last 3 times as long. Internal emails revealed during a 2018 lawsuit show exactly how Elon Musk handled that pitch. The verdict was that flywheels didn't fit the vertical integration strategy. Translation: Tesla needed to move battery cells to make the gigafactory in their car business viable. A storage system that never broke didn't help their bottom line. The proposal was buried and never spoken of again, and this wasn't just a one-off. Between 2000 and 2010, researchers at Berkeley, Purdue, Carnegie Mellon, and Oregon State all published data on home flywheels. Every single study proved that flywheels beat batteries on cost and longevity, and every single one of those papers disappeared from the public archives within a year and a half of publication. Not because the math was wrong, but because the math threatened a $63 billion market. I spent months digging through the digital footprints of these studies. It's always the same story. A study drops, interest spikes, people start sourcing parts, and then the trade associations step in. They use liability threats, patent claims, or just lean on university donors to silence the researchers. The result is always a memory hole. This isn't a coincidence. It's a systematic erasure of a technology that works too well to be profitable. So what does all of this actually mean for you, sitting at home with your utility bill? It means you have been fed a carefully crafted narrative. You've been convinced that keeping your solar power overnight requires a massive investment in volatile chemicals that are practically programmed to fail. They want you to believe that mechanical storage is a relic of the past, something clunky, dangerous, or just plain inefficient. But the reality is a system that slashes your costs by 95%, stays functional for your entire life, and needs almost zero work to maintain. It operates on the same rock-solid physics that has powered heavy industry and massive power plants for over 100 years. The only reason this hasn't landed on your doorstep is that for the battery giants, the real money isn't in the first sale. It's in the second, the third, and the fourth. A Tesla Powerwall is a gift that keeps on giving to the manufacturer every 12 years when you're forced to buy another one. A flywheel, on the other hand, is a one-time purchase that pays for itself and then just stops generating revenue for anyone but you. An industry that survives on the rinse and repeat sales model simply cannot coexist with a solution that never dies. You aren't going to see a glowing review of flywheel storage in the pages of Solar Power World. You won't find SunPower or Sunrun technicians recommending a spinning steel disc for your garage. Their entire workforce is trained to move the inventory that the battery conglomerates supply. And don't expect Tesla to come clean either. For them to admit that a mechanical wheel is a superior home storage solution would be to admit that their entire multi-billion-dollar energy division is built on a house of cards. The truth isn't in the marketing brochures. It's tucked away in the mechanical engineering textbooks of the 1950s. It's buried in the public patent archives and the messy bankruptcy filings of companies like Beacon Power. And most importantly, it lives in the garages of the DIYers, the people who looked at the physics, saw the scam, and decided to build their own destiny. These people didn't have a special agenda. They just understood basic science and refused to participate in a system of planned obsolescence. This technology exists because it is mathematically and physically superior, even if the business world hates it for exactly that reason. Let's bring this whole thing full circle back to your own garage. You might have just dropped $12,000 on a battery that has a death date etched into its chemistry 15 years from now. You were told it was your only path. You were told that anything mechanical was just too outdated or too risky for a modern home. But what they conveniently left out is that flywheel units have been the gold standard for reliable industrial storage for over a century. They didn't tell you that regular people have been assembling home versions for decades using salvaged parts. And they certainly didn't tell you that every major effort to bring this to the general public was systematically dismantled by the same corporations selling you a battery designed to fail. The performance you get from a flywheel is identical to the best lithium on the market. The lifespan, however, isn't even in the same league. At this point, the only thing keeping the battery industry alive is the fact that most people simply don't know there's an alternative. So here is the core question I want you to ask yourself. If flywheels have been banking power reliably for a century, if MIT confirmed they outlast chemical batteries by several decades, and if Tesla's own lead engineers were silenced because the tech didn't support a replacement sales model, why are you still being told that batteries are your only option? That isn't a rhetorical question. That is the fundamental question that changes your entire perspective. If you are the kind of person who believes that permanent, effective solutions are being buried just to protect corporate revenue streams, then you already know what your next move is. This isn't just about clicking a button on a video. This is about joining a growing number of people who are finished paying twice for a problem that should have been solved once. Subscribe right now if you want to pull back the curtain on what else is being engineered to fail in your daily life. And do me a favor, head to the comments and drop the exact amount you paid for your solar battery. I want to see the real-world receipts of how much this industry has been taking from you, because once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. And once enough of us are looking, the whole deceptive system starts to crack.